Our next panelist has a whole crew up here in the front row. They really came to shine, and I will say I do have a small bias because one of my law school classmates who we won a mock trial competition together is right here in the front row. Nika Baker, Audria, Pendergrass Lee. Yes! Now, I know our next panelist also has a crew in like an orange-red color. Y'all look fly. Okay, y'all gotta match over here. Please welcome Kelly Copes-Anderson. And then our last finalist, who has beautiful shoes on. I don't know if she has a crew, so I'm just gonna comment on her shoes. Oh, she does, Jessica Watson. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So happy to see you. So before we get started, I want to point out a few things, right? So I want to make sure we have a little bit of understanding about who you are talking to or who you're hearing from, and sort of lay the groundwork for what we hope to accomplish today. I am Natalie Norfus, and I have the great pleasure, along with my partner in DEI, who's my small crew of one, but we're mighty, Shantae Gordon.
Shantae.
We have the great pleasure of solving people problems. So we work with organizations across the world on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, HR, executive coaching, training, pretty much anything that involves people. And so I come to this work, I'm an employment lawyer. That's how I started, as a baby lawyer way back in the day. And then I was in-house. I was the chief diversity officer and global employment lawyer for Burger King, and then the brands that it acquired while I was there. So I come to this work with a lot of different perspectives on the workplace. And that brings us sort of to the piece of who we have with us today. I pulled out a few because you can read everyone's bios online, but I think what's represented up here on the stage is a huge array of perspectives and knowledge. If we look at Audria with her crew up here in front, Audria oversees DEI for FINRA. And what I thought was notable about her experience is that it's across 16 offices and over 3,000 employees. And as I'm sure Audria can tell you, when you have tentacles everywhere, that's complicated, and you have to think about all of the different things that your employees are facing in different geographies and the like. Audria and Kelly share a spread geography as well. Kelly has a global role, over 40,000 employees, right? So tons of data points, and I say that because we are data nerds. The data tells a story. We can't go off feelings, y'all. We gotta go off the data. That's how they make business decisions. And then we are also joined by Jessica. And Jessica touches, I think, really sort of some of the heart blood of what you see with DEI programs. She works for the second largest communications company in the world. And she oversees BRGs. Some of y'all know those as ERGs, but the groups that help support, the affinity groups and inclusion councils. And I will say inclusion councils also are sort of the key to kind of bringing many different voices to your senior leaders. So now when we think about, we have a breadth of experience. It covers the globe. It covers many different aspects of DEI. Let's just kind of lay the stage. So we have seen a lot of turmoil, I would say pendulum shifts, very, very significant pendulum shifts with DEI over the past 5 years. If we looked at how it started, I think of myself in like the early 2000s. I thought it was really strange. I was working for a law firm, my second year of law school, and they asked me to be on their diversity committee. And I'm like, what do I know? And I'm only gonna be here for 10 weeks. Like, how is this possible? But I was like one of the only Black summer associates, so it became easy to pluck you on and put you there. So when you think about those early years of DEI, it was somewhat performative, right? It was kind of like the absence of discrimination. We had a lot of surface level window dressing type events. And it kind of ebbed and flowed, but kind of stayed stagnant until George Floyd was murdered in May of 2020. Our phones rang off the hook. We met people where they were. It felt like, wait, people are finally becoming a little bit more intentional about this work. They're thinking about it on a larger level. Those of us who've been in for a while probably had sort of cautious optimism, right? We weren't totally sold that this is what was happening, but we were gonna go in all in. And then when we got to the middle of 2022, towards the beginning of 2023, we entered what I called the what now stage. Because everyone thought we were going to solve the world's woes in a year, right? And if for those of you who have worked in corporate America, sometimes it takes a year just to get a policy approved, right? So surely we're not going to solve 400 years of discrimination and racism and injustice in a year. But folks went in it as a sprint and not a marathon, right? And so then we have to have the conversations with folks on how we keep this thing going. And then now we are in this stage of, I call the employee voice, because the workplaces that we touch, people are not afraid anymore to say what they think. They are not afraid to burn bridges. They are not afraid to put you out there on social media, which frankly is stronger than the court systems these days, right? I think it's harder to be blasted on social media than it is to have a lawsuit filed against you at this point because of the power of those keyboards and those phones. And I think we also are seeing all of this overlaid over a brand new workplace. And I say brand new because we never paused after the pandemic, and folks are not okay, right? And we are trying to go at full speed when we have half the tank, a quarter tank, and all of that creates this perfect storm for the political landscape that we've seen. I live in Florida, so you don't have to feel sorry for me because it's not as bad as they make it sound on TV, but we lead the anti-DEI efforts, right? And that becomes the big headline. What we don't hear as much is the 11th Circuit just told DeSantis, you committed the greatest First Amendment sin with the Anti-Woke Act. So we don't hear those stories because that's actually a huge victory, and it hopefully sets the stage for all these other state legislations that are in these similar veins. So what we thought made a lot of sense for today is thinking about what are the keys of what we need to be thinking about here when it comes to DEI. We're going to look at where marginalized folks get stuck. We're going to look at burnout. And we're also going to think about what DEI is. And with that, I'd love to start with Kelly, because I know that sounds weird to say, like, doesn't everybody know what DEI is? But they don't. They really don't. So Kelly, can you start us off there and thinking? I know you think DEI is for everyone, which I love. So if we could start there.
It is. And the thing that we need to do, especially in this time where so many are coming with their voice, thinking that they are excluded as part of DEI, we have to be very clear and intentional with the way that we talk about DEI. So I go back in time, and we spent a lot of time talking about diversity definitions and equity definitions and inclusion definitions, and even cute ways to talk about DEI and what it means all together and getting invited to the dance, all of those types of stories. What we need to make sure of is that people understand that DEI is a strategic imperative.
Correct. Yeah.
It is a way for your business to be stronger, more innovative, and in the case of Lilly, why it is so core to our strategy and our values is because what we know as we serve patients, we need to make sure that we have diverse experiences, perspectives, and backgrounds to not only reflect the patients that we serve, but more importantly, to be able to understand their experiences so that we can truly create medicines and solutions that are going to make a difference. So we have to get clear about that as DEI leaders in terms of what that means. And so we can't stay at that high level of, the business case that's at a high level. You got to make sure that people feel that business case. They see it in everything that you do, that you're tying the DEI activities and initiatives to business metrics. So why is this important, and why do we have this clinical trial initiative? Why is it important in that we are, in the case of our company, where we have a great focus on a skin of color initiative for our immunology business? Why is diversity important for that? Because we need those voices activated at the table to truly give us insights so we can serve all that are deserving, in our case of our medicines, and that we're able to actually communicate, connect with them in a way that's going to be relevant.
And I appreciate you saying that because what I take away from what you just described is we have to operationalize DEI, right? Because a lot of times we've seen it sit off to the side and it doesn't get any air because it's not connected to anything that people understand. So when you tie it to the business, it becomes sort of the fabric of what you're doing. Audria, what are some of the ways in which you help dispel the notion or the misconceptions about what DEI is really about?
So it's interesting because for me, everybody at FINRA knows what it actually means. We are very clear. Diversity is about everything that makes you uniquely you.
Yes.
It is not just about protected categories. It's not about visible differences. It is literally everything that makes you uniquely you. Inclusion is making sure that you're able to bring your uniquely you talents, perspectives into the workplace in a way that can be leveraged. And equity is making sure that we're meeting you where you are, not, right, dismissing your talent because you need something different.
Right.
So as we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is very easy to dispel the myth because I don't care if you call it purple cow.
Right.
I don't care if you call it yellow star. What it is the environment that allows you, as Kelly said, to make sure that you are meeting your business needs within this organization in a way that leverages your talent and makes sure that we don't miss anything, right? The diverse perspectives are the most critical, right? Because if everybody comes and says, hey, you're a financial, how many of you know what FINRA is? Let's start there. Can I get hands? Who are my FINRA adjacent people?
And not your crew up front.
Besides my 22 crew up front. So we're a financial regulator, right? And so many of the financial firms here in the organization, here at the conference, many of you have your Series 6 license, your Series 7 license, right? We monitor every trade that happens across the globe 24 hours a day. And our mission is investor protection and market integrity. If we do not have the perspectives that are new and different, if we don't figure out how to build excellence, a center of excellence around Crypto Hub, right, a new product in the environment, if we don't learn to do that, we're not going to be able to protect investors, right? And so how many of you know that most people get their information in the Black community, get their information about finances from social media, right? Right? So imagine our task is to make sure that we are partnering with all of those firms that are keeping our markets vibrant so that you and you and you and you can safely realize financial gain, financial investment, financial security. If all of us are sitting in kind of our ivory tower, how do we know what's going on in social media? If we're not thinking about generational diversity, how do we know the non-truths that are being told, that are steering people towards financial fraud? We don't. So for us, similar to Kelly, it's a business imperative, but it's a mission imperative.
I think sort of what comes out of what you were saying is you'll get left behind if you're not up to date on what's going on in the world. And if we're only picking the same types of people who think the same and look the same, you are going to be out of business sooner than you think.
Out of business, and you will be defrauded. You will not
in your
have safe
business,
markets,
yes.
right? You will not have safe healthcare, right?
So in thinking about, transitioning from, okay, hopefully we all have our nuggets of how we're able to identify the real data that tells the story of why DEI helps move your business along and helps sustain your business. Then when we dig in, we end up in a lot of workplaces where you're one of only or one of a few, you're underrepresented, marginalized communities, you often come from marginalized communities. And so I'm looking to you, Jessica. I think all of us have probably gotten at least one phone call from a friend that said, they asked me to lead the DEI committee. They asked me to lead such and such group. Now, me and Shantae's first question is, are they going to pay you? Are there resources? What are the parameters, right? But Talk to us about how you balance having passion for DEI and wanting to sort of advocate for that versus taking on the burden and the load for free.
Yes, I really appreciate that question because for Publicis Groupe, a global advertising, technology, marketing, media company, one of the largest in the world, we have to be really intentional about not only how we're advancing DEI in our workplace, but also how we're bringing that into the marketplace with the clients that we're serving. The commercials, the advertisements, how those are being created. And so the impact of our work is vast. And so when we have talent who are from a wealth of different backgrounds and practices and experiences who are tapped to be a part of a DEI committee or a council or the culture club, whatever nomenclature that your organization decides to use, especially in this hybrid environment where we've got it virtually, we've got the office environment, your department, we're all operating in a very matrixed space and thinking about DEI in all of these spaces as well. Our intentional approach under the leadership of our Chief Diversity Officer, Geraldine White, who if you don't follow her, please do, she's incredible. We've taken a very intersectional approach to think about how can DEI be embedded across everywhere that our business operates and really make sure that it's in our business, it's in our learning and development, it's visible in our work in front and behind the camera of the creative that we're putting into the world, and know that everyone can contribute from the role that they have, and it is critical that DEI practitioners are steering that work. So you might have that passion, you might have that, that place in your spirit where you want to contribute, you want to make that difference, or perhaps you're just being tapped by someone who says, hey, you have an identity that I'm picking up on, come sit over here. And it's up to us to make sure we're steering and asking the right questions of what are the goals, what are we striving for, what does the organization need, and how can I contribute with the impact and skills that I have space for, and not automatically, accepting that role, to really ask questions and to dig deeper, because everyone can contribute from the seat, but that doesn't automatically make you a DEI practitioner.
Wow, wow. And let's sort of, if we take that to the next step, lived experience alone does not make you a DEI expert. Yes. I was thinking about it and preparing for today. Since 2020, we have talked to probably about 100,000 employees between surveys, focus groups, conflict facilitation, and the like. And that means that we are living in coding data, digging into data. That's not something that I knew how to do just because I was born looking this way, right? And so if someone is coming to you, say, hey, do you want to do this DEI committee? I think the question asking is so important. Not because you say no, not because you don't want to share your passion, but you don't want to burn yourself out. We walk into a lot of organizations where people get themselves as far as they can because they have no expertise, and then they get stuck, right? And then they're like, I don't want to be in charge of this anymore. And so what do the two of you all think about that in terms of just leaning on expertise and not just lived experience? Lived experience is important, of course, but.
Yeah, so when you say that, leaning on just expertise versus, I just want to make sure I'm...
The combination, making sure that there's expertise in the room.
This is what, we have just a great individual in our DEI office who has, he's like our historian, if you will, and has been there for 7 years. He always says, passion alone won't make the impact, right. Okay? Right. So it's great that you have a lived experience. You can identify, you can truly empathize. But what are the other things that you're going to do? Again, if this is a business imperative, you are going to run it like a business. You're going to have a strategy, you're going to have an execution plan, you're going to have metrics, you're going to have key stakeholders that you're going to need to bring along, and you're going to be doing change management all over the place.
All over
that
the place.
is what has to happen. You got to have those types of skills. And so for someone like me working at Lilly for 26 years, a medicines company that is serving patients in the areas of diabetes, obesity, oncology, immunology. These are all really serious conditions. And we need to make sure that we treat it as a business imperative because we know it's going to make our business better. And so for me, coming into this role, the skills that I had was, one, I have a long tenure within data and market research and insights and analytics. So I have that part of my package, as well as the commercial side of the business.
Right.
So with those skills, strategy, operations, metrics, analytics, being able to be in position to then drive things forward in a way that people can see the business impact becomes important. The other thing that I would say is that it becomes important to have diversity within your DEI team, if you're lucky to have a team, because I do know that we're in times where not everyone is able to have a team. And the thing that I've really focused in on my team is really pulling people from other places within the business, but just a range of skills. So strategic, creative, communication skills, ability to, because it's not just about putting on events or programs, but your ability to communicate clearly what your initiative is about. And so, very exciting that we've been able to develop a way to make inclusion for all and make it be seen as inclusion for all by having a pretty significant global platform that we call our Level Up DEI Conference. And it takes a tremendous number of talents to be able to pull this off. We started this initiative, and I'll just go even back in time. Before we came to this Level Up, we would have events by ERGs.
Right.
So our African American Network, which is what we used to call, is now called Black Employees at Lilly. They had a signature event. Our women leading at Lilly had a signature event. What we saw was an opportunity to better help the broader organization and reach the broader organization with an understanding that what our aim is inclusion for all. And that platform and the franchise that we have with Level Up is that we've been able to inspire leadership by having great speakers, external, even having celebrities like we had Marley Matlin come in to help us understand how we should become a disability confident culture, okay? We also are able to empower our employees because we have focused training, psychological safety, unconscious bias, how to become an ally. So we're training. And then we are also able to make sure that we have connection and create that time together as colleagues through this platform. And the platform is here in the US and it also extends globally. And I will tell you, we reach over 12,000 employees with this program, probably more than that because of all the virtual hits that we have when we have our resources available afterwards. But this education and communication is so critical to what you do so that everyone sees the DEI, that they have a place within DEI. And that's what I mean by DEI is for everyone.
Right.
Because when you do that, you start to quiet the voices as that's not for me, and that's only for that group, that individual, that identity. No, it is for all. And then when you create the programs that actually help all benefit, then you really are able to quiet the voices.
So Audria, Kelly gave us the blueprint for how you approach DEI as a business initiative, and obviously you bring skills to the table and have that ability to do that. How do you look at it in terms of the combination between lived experience, expertise, coming at it from a business standpoint?
Yeah, what's interesting is just to kind of take and tie all of it together, right? I think we started with what is DEI? How do you leverage the marginalized voices and why does it matter? And I would say for me, it really is kind of this notion that you can't hear the marginalized voices and then unhear it.
Right.
So when you hear the voices, the people who, let's say they want to be a part of the solution, they want to share with you their experiences, you gotta do something with that. Because if we're gonna remain viable as a practice, as diversity, equity, inclusion practitioners, we have to, right, embed all the systems, equity into all the systems, all the processes, but we have to react in real time. And so I just want to give an example of that, if you don't mind. So at FINRA back in 2020, we had a culture survey. How many of your organizations have culture surveys, engagement surveys, all the things, feedback surveys? Hey, tell me what you think. How many of you have done those surveys and nothing happened? I mean, you don't have to raise your hand, it's your boss, right? And there's a lot of
Nobody raised their hand in the front row. I just want to let you know.
Of course they didn't. Not with my FINRA shirts on. So what I'll share with you, that culture survey, and this goes back to why you can't just have passion in DEI to be good at DE&I. You gotta understand what that data says. And if the data tells you that an intersection, as Jessica was saying, of your population is experiencing the workplace differently, more negatively, you gotta do something about it. What we found back in 2020 in the engagement survey, culture survey, all the stuff people take, right, was that when you slice and dice the data any way you want by affinity, our African American women were experiencing our workplace in significantly less positive ways than everybody else. So different than African American men, different than all the other fill-in-the-blank intersections of affinity. We couldn't overlook that. We couldn't say, that's interesting, hope it gets better. So what we did was we listened further. We brought together African American women, and we had what was called a diversity dialogue. And we just asked them, what's working well at this organization, what's not working well, what brought you here, what kept you here, how do we find other talented people like you? We had had many of those conversations through the years, and with this particular group, you couldn't even get past what's not working well. Yep. Because they were not feeling supported. They did not perceive our workplace as a place where they could see themselves thrive and have joy. They saw it as a place that they came, period. So we actually created a program called Connections. And what you see with all my tribe, my blue shirts up front, is the impact of taking action. We brought these women together. We asked them what they needed. And they needed coaching. They needed peer coaching, group coaching, individual coaching, but more than anything, they needed to know they weren't alone, that each other existed, and that we would have each other's back. And so today, 3 years later, we just, this is our third year actually coming here as well. We, on Wednesday when we got here, had our own little FINRA session where people just shared the impact of this work. We have promotions, we have career changes, we have impact that cascades down and through the organization because we took the time to invest in those who said, hey, I need help now. And that's what equity is. It's looking at the data, making sure everyone has what they need, but making sure that you're taking care of those that are most in need first. These women are all brilliant. Like, talent is just where they started, right? But if you're experiencing something different and there's a way in your organization to harness that energy of, hey, let's just talk about it. Let's give you what you need. You see the impact, you see the outcomes, and there is no conversation about, oh, should we be having a business case discussion about diversity, equity, inclusion? Or should we be talking about all the talent that we saved, that we nurtured, that we had more engaged because we decided to invest in them right then?
That. Yes, yes. So you talked about the surveys, and as I mentioned, we love a good survey. And what I would tell you is that when we think about the, say it again?
Did you say do we? We do?
We love a good
do?
survey.
Okay.
I think you love a good survey too, it sounds like.
I love the outcomes.
Yes. So when we do our DEI strategy surveys with clients, the number one issue that comes up across the board all the time, every time, is career advancement. And so this point that you brought up around Black women having the worst experience in your organization also tracks with the data that we collect. And we were working with a law firm, and they were really like, we want them, talking about the Black women in general, we want them to learn how to become a partner. And I said, do they even know what their performance is like today? I said, I think that's step one, right? If you don't know how well you're doing today, it doesn't really matter how to get to the next step because you don't even know if you're in position to. And the reason why I think that's relevant is also as an HR lawyer, I see all the backside, right? So I always say there's a room, me and Jessica were talking about this, there's a room and there's a room. And the room is, hey, everybody has a chance to succeed and you're great and you're doing great and everything's great and it's so good and it's so good. And then you are like, wait, but how did he get promoted? I'm over here doing all this work and they told me I was doing this great job. So I would just start off by saying, if you don't know, when we went around the room with these Black women, we were like, do you know how your performance is at this organization? And we had a definition.
Yeah.
Right? Because we love shared language. Thank you, Lavelle, my girl there in the back, who reminds us that we talk about this all the time. Are we talking about the same thing? Right? So we gave the definition. And not one woman, it was 20 women, not one woman could confidently say what their performance was. They could say they had very short performance reviews where people will tell them they were doing a great job, but they're like, I don't know if that means I write well, I do well with clients, and I also don't know what that means as when I compare it against my peers. So when we think about that and we accept as a fact, there's a room and there's a room, Jessica, what are some of the things that we should be thinking about to make sure we know what's going on in that other room that they don't tell us about?
Absolutely. And understanding that disparity between both rooms and the silos that could potentially exist, I think it's important to know who are the players, where are you sitting in that playing field, and are you tapping into your network, your mentors, your sponsors, so that can you get the information firsthand, secondhand, thirdhand, hearsay? How are we getting that intel? And I think for Publicis Group, one of the areas we've done to start to break down those silos, it's similar to your Level Up program, and it's called Pausing for Action. This year is its 5th year, and it's been really powerful to see. We started it in 2020, and what we did is similar. Data input, asking specific questions to the 27,000 employees in the US, what it is they need as it relates to DEI. And across those 15,000 data points, we distilled that down to 7 actions. And the outcomes of those are programs, policies, initiatives that are transforming the way Publicis Group operates and fosters DEI in the US and globally. And I can talk about some of the examples of those programs, whether it's our Black Talent Summit, it's how we're cultivating the careers of Black talent. And it's specifically designed to meet the needs of the Black talent in our organization. Our Black Talent Career Development Program, which is cohort-based and it's very incredible, and it adds on supporting Black talent so they can thrive whatever career stage they're at, early, mid, senior, because you know how messy it can get at different levels. And it's beyond the talent acquisition or recruiting element that is so important, but a lot of organizations tend to get stuck there. So how can we bring that in and really make sure that our talent inside of our organization is continuing to advance? And that's the workplace side. And when we start to look at the marketplace side, I'm very lucky to have leaders in this room right up front who are leading initiatives, one of which is called the Once and For All Coalition, that's very much focused on disrupting the legacy barriers around media and diversifying our media to build a more equitable media ecosystem. And that's something that Black Enterprise is an incredible partner with, but we're thinking about what does that look like inside our walls and inside our industry, and how are we bringing those two together? And how do we bring our clients along and our talent along the journey to understand this is the way you can contribute, this is what we're focused on, this is how you can pour into this work, wherever you sit within this organization. And it goes back to what Judy was saying earlier of figuring out that impact and really tailoring it. And I'll just add from my seat, focusing on how we're fostering belonging, an area close to my heart. I hope all companies here have business resource groups. We are very blessed to have 18. And when we think about the intersections of those communities, we want to think about how are you upskilling those leaders who are tasked with fostering this community and connection that's going to accelerate your business, and how are you rewarding them? That reward could look like showing up here. That could look like compensation. It could look like a wealth of different things depending on the identities and needs of that community. But we have to think about all sides of the coin to really dig into what talent need.
So the three of you, and I'm going to say this because I think what we're hearing today is people who are lucky to work for these companies, right? Because they're intentional. Yeah. Each of you have brought examples of intentionality, but there are people who sit in the audience that are like, we don't even have a diversity DEI team. And so what would we say to those who don't have leaders who are as thoughtful as the three of you of thinking about, outside of knowing who the players are, what that second room is all about?
If you don't mind,
Of course.
I'll start on that one.
Of course I don't mind.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So I think in the absence of a formal structure around this, right, you have to be brave. It's not always going to feel good to be brave, but you have to be brave, and you have to toot your own horn so that you are finding sponsors, right? And so a sponsor is someone who can speak for you when you're not in the room. Different than a mentor, right? And sometimes mentors are sponsors, but a mentor is somebody that you talk with, you vibe with, you figure out, hey, some advice and counsel. But that mentor is not always in the room when your name, your opportunity that doesn't even know it has your name assigned to it, is in that room. And so I want you to be brave, and I want you to start by more frequently talking about your impact, right? Talking about your personal impact. What is it that I'm doing in this organization to help make this organization successful? I want you to talk about it. I want you to find someone who doesn't look like you, who gets to be in rooms that you're not in, and say, hey, I need 15 minutes. I want to talk to you about the impact that I want to make in the organization, but more importantly, the impact I'm already making. You get a check every 2 weeks because you're already making an impact. For those of you who are entrepreneurs, you have those clients because you already are making impact. Talk to those clients, talk to those stakeholders, and tell them that you want to be considered. Because it's one thing for people to know who you are and what you do. People are happy to relegate you to that one box that you tell them about.
Yes.
Make sure that you let them know that there's not a box that can hold you.
Listen, Audria wouldn't stand in line. Audria refused to stand in line. Every time the amazing organizers are trying to get Audria in line, I'm like, nobody's gonna put you in a box. She's like, never. But I think what's really important about that, and I appreciate this example, is that I heard at the end of the prior session that all sponsors are not equal, and I think that's important to keep in mind too. Look, you're not gonna be able to 007 know exactly where everyone stands, but I think that part is important. But when I was in-house, I was the only employment lawyer for this 3 multi-billion-dollar brands, right? And the chief diversity officer, and I was tired,
Yes.
right? And I didn't feel like I was growing because I was running around after my clients. You can't say that, you can't do that. Let me read it first. Oh my God, did you talk to this person? Right, and I didn't feel like I was getting anything new. And I went to an Urban League event in Fort Lauderdale where Carla Thomas was speaking. I don't know if you all know her. If you don't, she's incredible. And this was years ago, so I hadn't heard the sponsor concept. And I remember sitting there, and she's like, if you don't have a sponsor, if you don't know who your sponsor is, and I'm gonna pass this along because it's really, really impactful. If you don't know who your sponsor is, that means you don't have one and you need to go find one. And when she said that, I was thinking about my boss, and I was like, nope. I was thinking about my main client, and I was like, nope. And I was thinking about the president at the time, the president of the Burger King brand. And I was like, maybe he will be my sponsor. And so I called his assistant, who always make really great friends with the assistants because they know everything. And so I said, hey, is he going to be in town anytime soon? And because he traveled like 300 days out of the year. Just so happened he was going to be in town the next day. And she's like, I can only give you this slot. It doesn't matter. I'll take it. And I said to him, because he had been a lawyer too, and he moved into the business, what would it take for me to move into the business? And he was like, I didn't even know you were interested, which was hard for me because I had expressed interest, right? So that meant my message was not getting relayed to people who could make those decisions, right? And then I, explained to him, I was like, look, I feel like I've hit a ceiling here in this role. I know I could have this role forever, but that's not what I want. And a week later, he offered me a role overseeing franchising for the Burger King brand. I had to keep franchising diversity, which I was happy to do because I was earning my green belt, and that was a great project to work on. But then there was all these things that kept happening where my new boss was like, I know you're a mom and you can't travel. And I'm like, I never said that, right? Like, I've never said that. And so you realize, in some senses, you're going to have your partners, you're going to have your allies, but it's you and you, right? And so if you're not being thoughtful about telling people what you're willing to do, and it was very scary, but if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. But you have to advocate for yourself, certainly, because if you're in the rooms where the decisions are made, you know that's how people get there. So, and I'm sorry, I just had to share that because I think this was a really good example. But tell me, I know you had some thoughts here too.
I had a few thoughts, but I will say the point that you just made is so critical. The advocating for yourself, having that courage. Going back, as you said, you got to have the courage. So if you do not have a DEI team or a DEI structure, you do need to have the courage to be able to own your own story, own your own talent. And then if you are not heard, maybe it's not the place for you. And that's not the worst thing in the world,
Right.
okay? But I want to speak to how much we learned through work that we did with what we call our employee journeys. And going back to 2015, there was a question who is from our now CEO, who had the question of, why are there not more women? This was the starting point. Why are there not more women in leadership positions here? Okay? First of all, I'm so glad he asked that question.
You're like, let me tell you.
Okay. And that was a starting point to some really important critical work. And so very much like what you were talking about, where you spent time to really hear the voice beyond the survey. Because surveys, to your point, are good, but there's a lot of double clicking that needs to happen with those surveys to really unearth what is the real root cause of what's going on here. So that question was asked, and that launched our first employee journey that was for women. We brought, through that work, we understood the challenges, the opportunities, the disappointments, the frustrations, and the tensions that women were feeling on their road to trying to get to become a leader within our organization. It was so powerful, and it's the type of voice and insight that doesn't only just hit the mind, it was hitting the heart. And I think that's an important piece to think about, is owning your story in a way where people can truly hear you. And when you tell it in a way where they understand that that challenge is maybe not fair, that challenge that you have is something that they're not experiencing. People start to kind of wake up and like, well, why is that happening here and not there? And that becomes an important way to unlock and open up minds. So we did not only that work with women starting in 2015, and the goal of that work, and when we unpacked all the insights, it was, we were not nearly, at that point in time, this was that 2015, we were at like 37% women in management at that point, okay? And what was told to, who is now our CEO, who was the sponsor for this project, is that it would take 17 years to get to parity if we stayed on the path that we were on. Okay? Well, y'all, we're at parity globally for leadership, for women in leadership and management today. It takes that intentionality. It took the bravery and the courage of those women to tell their stories and really unpack it and tell the things that aren't always the fun things to have at the coffee or the lunch, okay? And not only did we take those insights, then we brought women that were telling those stories into an innovation lab experience where we could come up with solutions that would really make a difference. And then we put goals, metrics around it to make sure that we held ourselves accountable to it. We not only did that to understand women because this was so eye-opening, we ended up doing it for Black employees, Asian employees, Latino employees, LGBTQ+, and we most recently just finished up last year our Persons with Disabilities employee journey. And let me just tell you, the intersectionality, as you talk about that, really understanding what that means as there's intersectionality across persons with disabilities in ways that are almost unlike all of the other journeys. 25%, what we found in our journey work, 25% of our employees have a disability. 25% also could say that they're a caregiver, because we understood disabilities as well as caregivers. This work is really going to allow us to really dig into those insights and truly drive the inclusion for all, given that intersectionality.
So usually I'm the one who's giving time. Shantae and I have a podcast. It's called What's the Deal? Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Leadership. And I'm usually the one to cut the conversation short, but we just got that now.
Okay.
It wasn't me this time because I was ready to keep talking forever. One thing I think we would just like to make sure we leave you with before we get to questions, and so if you do have questions, there's mics here available, is burnout. So when we think about burnout, the World Health Organization gives us a nice definition for it, but it really gets at lower energy and finding you're not as connected to your work or your life. Burnout I think can happen in being a mom, being a DEI practitioner, being whichever part of your identity you are. Just very quickly, what are some of the things that you do to either help yourself or others address burnout?
I wish I knew.
Oh,
I mean,
that too.
Just to be frank, right, it's exhausting and no one has solved that. And as a DEI practitioner, we have to be queens, kings, and all of the above of compartmentalization. And when you have to compartmentalize so that you can keep the work moving forward, even when it's work that impacts you, it is exhausting. So I would say learning to compartmentalize, but having a tribe, having someone that you can just call and say, hey, today is not a great day. Having trust, I actually have an amazing leader. Having trust in my leader that I can be like, I know this ain't great. I'm telling you, it's not a great day. But if you don't admit that you're not having great days, that burnout is going to hit you whether you want it to or not. So I would say just be honest with yourself and those around you as you're coming to that point.
I love that. What about you?
Burnout is really important. And I will tell you, we're DEI leaders, but we're also people. For me, my personal story is last year I suffered loss of my sister, my one and only sister, and my father. That on top of doing this work, I found myself in a place for the first time in 26 years where I just said, I have got to put the boundary up. And I'm so glad that I did. Back to your point of having a tribe, I did have a tribe. I also got a therapist. So I'm gonna tell you something. It is so critical of us, especially as Black women, to take good care of our mental health.
Yes.
Okay? So I have no shame in it, and there is no stigma. In fact, on Friday, I will be stepping out to the side to make sure I have my call.
Exactly.
Because it is a power play so that I can be all the things in this work that is critically important. and also be there for my family, my husband and my children, and the people that I love deserve that.
Yes.
Jessica.
Copy and paste what these fine women have said.
Plus one.
plus one. I think I would just add definitely therapy, reiterate that, but also slow down. I think DEI work, DEI practitioners, we spend so much energy creating space for other people, safe space, brave space, whatever you might call it, that we forget to find that space for ourselves. And when I look at the DEI community, we need to do a better job of connecting with each other. We are not new to this, and I'm sure every one of you are true to this. Like, we need to be connected with one another and take that seriously. So for anyone who feels like they're one and only doing that DEI work, you know my name, you can find me, and that support system is here, and that's what's so special about Black Enterprise.
So the Norfus firm is going on spring break next week because we're tired. And so I just add time off. I noticed that, I mean, I have an incredible team. We work really, really hard. We try not to be perfectionists, but we are all the time. We're trying to discern what we be perfectionists about, because you can't be a perfectionist about everything. And I just said to Shantae about a month ago, I am exhausted. Yeah. And you're exhausted. And Stephanie's exhausted. And Leah's, I was like, we just need to take some time off. So way we're dealing with approaching burnout is a break. Because I felt like, yes, everybody has PTO, but when you go on PTO, you sometimes worry about your team and if you're letting someone down. But if we're all off together, and I sent the email that if you think you have to work, you better come talk to me, because the goal is no work for the week, and just being thoughtful of that piece. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
No.
Sounds like it's on now.
Hello, hello. Oh, thank you.
There you go.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gail Guest Brown Impact. You have been so inspiring. I would love to hear your perspectives on this notion that status threat is behind, particularly that we've not included white men in DEI efforts, that status threat is behind this DEI pushback. I would love to hear your...
You have to include the white men. They have the power. They have the ability to kick you right the heck out of what you're doing if you don't. And as Audria said in the beginning, all of us have diversity we bring to the table. The conversation has been skewed because we only focus on underrepresented diversity, but everyone comes. We tell white men that all the time. They tell us a story, you're like, come bring that. That's relevant, right? And so I think, but I tell people all the time, if you think DEI is about excluding white men, you are gonna lose every day of the week.
I would love to hear your perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just say ditto. I mean, because literally, right? I have facilitated conversations where I walked into a room where women had said, here's my experience that I've had, and it's because I'm a woman. And the men in that room said, I've had the same experience. And oftentimes, right, and let's be clear, there are people who are ill-intended in our workplaces, in our communities, and wherever. It is what it is, right? But oftentimes, we will attribute things to the affinity that we feel most close to, and not ourselves be open to understanding that there are other things at play, right? It may be in-group, out-group bias that's happening, but because you're only talking about it with a group of women, you may not know that this other experience is happening or not happening. And sometimes when you have that conversation with the men, with the women, with the non-binary, with the fill in the blank, all the things, you find that people have much more similar experiences, and sometimes it's a culture issue in the organization or on the team that's causing the problems, and not necessarily an intended jab or slight at fill in the blank affinity. So I agree, they have to be a part of the conversation, or else you're only getting one part of the conversation.
Thank you. My name is April Weathers. I work with 110. And my question is, we've already discussed the business case for DEI, but what about the people case? You're working with a lot of groups that may have reason to be distrustful, especially when you're thinking about a talent acquisition type of question. So how do you think within your organizations about making sure that you're offering opportunities and programs, et cetera, that are actually going to be trusted and used by the people they're intended for?
That's we've worked really hard within Lilly as I think about our development programs, our talent programs, really thoughtful to kind of match the need with the solution. And so there is a plethora of, because we have the scale as an organization, a plethora of opportunities that we have. And then being clear in articulating what they are about and what they are for. I do want to answer your question because I heard you ask about trusting that the program is going to actually have an impact. Could you give me a little bit more on that? I just want to make sure I'm answering it.
So to elaborate some, we've done a lot of work with Black talent, especially Black talent without four-year degrees, looking at companies that have DEI programs and being like, sure, you can call it that, but I don't believe it until I see it. So trying to address that trust, not just within the Black community, but I think especially for us here, thinking about that.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to not only being able to be clear on the intent, so that's true, but making sure that you loop back on outcomes. How do the stories get told? And really showing the picture that this is the kind of impact that you can have. So we're good partners with 110, and we have a skills first apprenticeship program as part of our equity work. And I will tell you, we make sure that we highlight and showcase the kind of impact and what a better organization that we are for those apprentices that we have in there. And those are folks that we are hiring that are, it's based on their skills, that would not have otherwise had an opportunity because they didn't have a four-year degree. So in that program, it's important to be clear about what the program is, but also show the impact that we're a better organization because of those skills that those individuals brought.
You have to tell people you're listening.
Yeah.
Right? It's interesting how often employers miss out on getting credit for what they're doing because they just don't tell people that they're doing it. And they don't think they need to because they think people are going to make the connection of, but look, we're doing all these things. And I think having a communications person on the team is always super critical. I mean, of course, if you're not doing the thing, you shouldn't get credit for it, of course. But part of building trust is saying, you told me this was a problem. We went and we looked at it, and here's what we're doing. Like, you have to do that all the time for folks. And I see Jessica agreeing, but I don't know if you want to weigh in there. But you do got to let people know what you're doing.
You absolutely do have to let people know that what you're doing and what those incomes are. Ask those questions and be open to the feedback of if those outcomes, as Kelly was saying, if those outcomes aren't landing where the program was designed for it to land. That needs to be shared, and we need to exchange that trust and have that safety to engage in that productive manner. I think the way you show up in those programs, don't wait until the last minute of the closing ceremonies of a development program to say, this didn't work for me. So you need to engage in that conversation because it's in a good faith effort. And that communications piece is so critical. I think it gets so lost in the DEI practitioner space of how important it is to have someone who understands DEI and communications.
I think we have maybe one more. Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies. My name is Kenia Robinson, and I'm a food safety and quality director for PepsiCo. And I'm on a project building a new site. And one of the things we're working on is culture. And so in my spare time, I've been asked to build up our DEI programs. And we have 10 ERGs.
Wait, what's going on? Didn't we just talk about this?
Yeah. It's a labor of love, so I'm okay with that part.
Okay.
But we have 10 ERGs, and I am struggling to find sponsorship, the right fit for our last two ERGs. And I'm curious, what advice do you have for choosing the right person when they may not necessarily stand up and volunteer, but that spirit is there, how do you go find the right fit for the right employee resource group?
Can I take that? This notion of not being able to find executive sponsors for your employee resource groups, like literally, I want to fall off the stage. I think that if I were you, with this extra job that you have, if I were you, I would go straight to my human resources team and say, hey, show me the succession plan. Who are the people who need to have exposure, cross-functional responsibilities, prove that they can lead a team that is not in their area of expertise? Give me their names so that I can go and assign them to employee resource groups.
Yes.
Yes.
And make them run those ERGs like they do their business.
Yes.
And if it were me, who had a second job like you, I would also provide clear and transparent feedback both to them and their leaders and the HR team that's overseeing the talent management program to say, hey, so-and-so's really stepped up. And even though they aren't of the same affinity as this ERG, that ERG is thriving under them.
Can I add one thing? Executive sponsorship and BRG leadership is a job, and it should be treated as such. Make sure they have a job description, they have a performance review cycle. You kick off and you review and you stay in touch and you treat it like a role and give it that honor that it deserves. And you document, and if you have more questions, I'm happy to share some of those tools.
Thank you
I
so
love
much.
it. I'll just say I have one more thing that I'll just share is that at my company, at Lilly, it is an expectation of our CEO that the folks that work for him have to be leaders of an ERG. Now, back to your job point, some are better than others.
That's right.
I mean, which is true. But they're also know that they want to be successful at it. So really understanding what does someone want in terms of an outcome and what's in it for them, and being able to help them see how this opportunity can make a difference is a great way. It gets back to your point, find the talent that actually needs the opportunity. And that's true for executives, because we all, no matter what level we are, want to be successful in our roles. And that is a great, great opportunity to do that.
Oh, we would love to stay here with y'all and keep talking. Thank you for the input and the time, and thank you, ladies.
Great. That was so good. Thank you. So good. You were awesome.